Andrew, Jaroslav talked about inequality, and he said the word inequality exactly as I wrote down the word inequality. And what we've done is we've incentivized inequality. We've incentivized the big companies to basically gain more of the pot, which of course they are doing also. How are we going to create it? And use the word. I mean, somebody put up in the chat parasitical, which I think it is parasitical capitalism. Absolutely. How are we going to change that? I mean, can we change that? Because if we don't change that economically and that growing inequality and disparity, then there's very little hope to have any significant change, I would think.
Again, I'd come. There's a couple of things I always. You've heard me say on multiple occasions, and David's probably heard me say them as well. Firstly, I don't think we bring enough multidisciplinary thought to the discussions. That we often communicate in our own silos, or if you don't like a silo, you can have a cylinder of excellence and get rid of your silo. I still work with people very occasionally that live a hunter-gatherer existence. They're not worried about Amazon. They're not worried about the internet. They don't worry about any of those things. They choose to live a hunter-gatherer existence as they have done for millennia. And I think there is this propensity to view the world through Western eyes as to how we change things. And within the Western world, those companies do very well in generating a perceived need, and people will have to rush out and buy that, whatever it happens to be. They're very good at the marketing. They've got those types of things down pat. We at the moment are having some fairly serious discussions in Australia about a couple of duopolies and that these companies are price gouging. Yet the Australian government hasn't changed our corporation laws seriously for well over 30 years. The focus is still on money. The focus is not on social license to operate. It's not on sustainability. It's not on supporting the environment. It's not on having a good corporate relationship with your community. All of that could be introduced into legislation if governments were seriously interested in doing that. But we are, as I think we've said before, this is a genuinely complex problem. You can't just pull one lever here and know what's going to happen at the end of it. You pull that lever and multiple things happen, and people have reactions to that. So there's a couple of things in this space. Number one, COVID, working from home, that's something new. Well, is it really? About 200 years ago, most people worked from home. The local bootmaker worked from home. The local carpenter worked from home. The local blacksmith worked from home. We've changed the society to be industrialised, where everybody goes to a particular point. It's economically feasible. It means that you can have mass production. You can bring costs down in some areas, but it's not a traditional way of the way humans operate. We know that in environments where the magical figure, and Robin Dunbar's done the research out of Oxford, around about communities of about 150 people function very differently to communities of 10 million people. So we've set the world up in a particular way. The question is, do we want to unwind that, or do we want to find another way of doing it that plugs into some of these ways that we used to do things? And I think that's the big issue in this space. Going backward may be a better way to go forward than trying to just blindly launch in. And whilst I recognise that all models are flawed, some are helpful and some are dangerous, within the qualitative views of the world, there are ways of trying to expand people's thinking to think about what could happen as opposed to what will happen. Now, humans love certainty. They love to know what's going to happen. Well, they think they do. You watch somebody who's a fanatical football player or observer who hasn't watched the game. He doesn't want you to tell the score at the end. He wants to watch the game and have the thrill of that. So we've got a lot of material here about the way we sew things up. And I think the broader question is about how do we tap into the whole world for their knowledge, because the point about, we need to have laws that everybody abides by. I have no problem with having laws that everybody abides by, but we need to make sure everybody's represented when those laws are written. and it's not just the dominant group, because the dominant group this year may not be the dominant group in 50 years' time. And I think that's a bigger question about how do we bring these groups together. So do I think there's hope for the future? Yes, I think there is. And I think we have some tools to sort of move that forward. The question I think that, and we probably know the answer in part, is are those who have power and have the money and in the position of economic privilege willing to release that so that the world can change? And I think in a lot of cases, the answer is no. If you've got the power, why are you going to want to release it? Because it serves you and it serves you well. And I think the earlier comments that Sheela made about the colonisation of data and the colonisation of information and how do we decolonise and how we democratise that. And we talk a lot about data's not extractive. It takes a lot of electricity to run some of those data centres, and at the moment, it's still based on what we dig out of the ground. And look, Australia's a big coal exporter. We benefit from that now. We go to clean energy, maybe that's different, but that's not going to happen tomorrow. That's going to take time to transition to. So whilst in some ways we look to the past, it's very physically extractive and you can see the extraction. I think one of the issues that we need to address as we move forward is what's being extracted that we're unaware of. Where's the data being stolen or borrowed from people, and they don't even know it's been stolen from them.
It is interesting because, I mean, again, as you said, most of our corporate laws were written 30 years ago, some of them written 100 years ago. The idea of an incorporated company or shareholders is 100, 200 years old. Milton Friedman, of course, said that the only objective of any corporation is to make money for its own shareholders. It has no other social responsibility whatsoever. And of course, any organization has a responsibility to minimize its tax bill. And what they do is they cheat. They don't just minimize it; they basically fix the system with the collusion of every other authority in the world. When I sent it out, I wrote a paper, I think about 2015, on why regulatory systems don't work. And the reason regulatory systems don't work is because the regulators think that if we make rules, people will stick to them. And the people they're trying to regulate just say, mate, so, we'll just get the lawyers in and we're just going to ignore that completely. Right. David Horobin, I'm going to ask you to keep it slightly brief, because what I do want to do is I want to go round the table one more time and get phone comments. But again, so much stuff being brought up. You, of course, are helping develop the leaders of the future, the present leaders of today. Your thoughts basically on general, and then we will go around the table one more time.
Okay, so what can we do? Well, we have to work with the leaders. These are the people who are eventually going to change things. So what can we do? Well, one, I think we have to be careful about language. I think we can all do that, and to try and reduce this fever of anxiety that is around. And I think that we should, and I have been doing this, and I've seen some very interesting results from that, by the way. This fever of language fever of anxiety around use of language. So that's something that we can do. Coming back to this issue of trust, and I think this is really important. David, you said it's a transactional process. Yes, but trust in a leader, they need to be competent, they need to be reliable, and they need to have empathy. All of those values of trust and those characteristics are completely destroyed by self-interest. And it's self-interest in organizations and in leaders that destroys the trust in the community. Leading on from that is, I think that we really have to think about the social contract that citizens have with its authorities. These social contracts are being dissolved. They're being dissolved because critical infrastructure is being sold off. They're being people's personal data, all this data issue is being sold off. And so the transaction, if you wish, David, between government authorities and the citizen populations through these social contracts is the big issue. And I think that that's the point that we need to push our leaders in. We try to do that a little bit. We don't give necessarily answers at GCSP. What we try to do, and Andrew knows, is we try to get different points of view. And we want people to go back to their capitals and to think about what we've been discussing during any of our courses. It's a slow process. But I think this trust issue, the social contract, is critical. I've got another couple of points, but I'll hand back to you.
No, that's fine. And listen, what I'm really happy about, I'm delighted about, is the level of interaction in the chat. By the way, everybody, thank you for that. When we publish the proceedings of this whole conference, which we will be doing, we will be taking those. So you will be recorded. Your comments will be recorded. So feel free to put comments in the chat. This is your opportunity to be part of what we believe is a genuine conversation, a historical record of a conversation of significance.